Every single weekend for about 4 to 5 years, I would order a large pizza. I would get some kind of appetizer like mozzarella sticks. And then I would go to the grocery store and I would pick up at least a pint of ice cream and probably things like a Snickers bar and a Kit Kat. And I would go to town. I would binge eat for at least 3 to 4 hours, followed that up with putting my fingers down my throat and forcing myself to throw up because honestly, I felt sick. Not only sick, but I felt ashamed. And this was my binge eating habit and ritual that I followed for years because during the week, I would restrict myself. I would eat bland, boring chicken that was literally just boiled chicken, no seasoning. Sometimes I would add things like rice, maybe a little bit of broccoli, but I would starve myself and I would work out like a crazy person because I was determined to get the physique that I always wanted. But all that led to was an unhealthy relationship with food and a really bad binge eating habit. But I was able to fix it. And I was able to finally, once and for all, stop this whole binge eating cycle. And on today's video, I'm going to share exactly how I did it. I'm going to teach you exactly how to prevent binge eating forever. And it starts with the number one thing. Now, I wrote down a lot of notes, and so I'm going to go through as much as I can. So strap in and let's just get right to it. Number one is we got to avoid long periods of time without food and inconsistent meal times. Now, we are going to talk about fasting and how you can use fasting, but we still have to stick to a fasting schedule that is consistent. Because do you know what the biggest cause of binge eating is? Now, I know for a lot of you, it's stress. A lot of you probably deal with emotional ups and downs. You got a really demanding career, or maybe your lifestyle just revolves around food a lot of the time. But what I've seen with working with over 7,500 high performing clients, executives, doctors, lawyers, guys who run big businesses, people who have a lot on their plate with kids and travel sports and all that. I've been doing it for 20 years. What I found to be the biggest indicator of a potential binge eating cycle is doing different things every day, eating different quantities of foods, some days less, some days more, some days, sometimes binge eating, being just on this roller coaster of a diet, completely different types of foods and eating at different times a day. So sometimes you skip breakfast, sometimes you don't. It's always inconsistent. You got to get into a routine. Heck, even if you got to use a calendar reminder and alarms to remind you of your eating windows. I'm not telling you have to eat at the exact same moment every single day, but it's a good idea to get into a habit of having windows of time where you do consume consistent meals or snacks that allow you to hit your goals. All right. You need to get into a regimen. Now, we use the word discipline. There does need to be consistency around your schedule. That means that you need to eat at the same time during your lunch breaks, during the workday, right? You need to choose to be a breakfast person or not a breakfast person. And then you got to get home and have a consistent dinner time. All right. I hear guys all the time saying like, man, I miss meals. And that leads me to getting these crazy hunger cravings. And so I just emotionally get stressed out. So I go grab whatever's easiest. And most of the time, the easiest stuff isn't the healthiest stuff. But we're going to talk about how to make it easy as we go through this video. In fact, before I forget, I put together something really special. I have boatloads of enjoyable meal plans, grocery lists, and really an anti-binge eating system. It's part of our 3M system. If you want to get copies of that, just comment the word team below and I'll add you to our free community. It's our network for high performers who want to look good with their shirt off, live a long time, have more sex, be the superhero their kids needs. It's all free. Just comment the word team below and I'll add you to the group. So random eating times is going to cause your appetite to spin out of control. This was the case for me, right? Back in the day, I didn't have consistent eating times. I was all over the place, right? I was trying to do too many things at once, which then leads to hunger hormones being all out of whack. Your cravings will be up and down. Your blood sugar and energy levels will be rock bottom and or sky high, depending on what's going on different times of day. And so you're going to feel like you are literally on an emotional eating roller coaster. So you need to mark down your eating times on a calendar, okay? And once again, stick to eating windows. Doesn't have to be exactly at 1:05 p.m. Eastern every day or whatever. It could be between 12 and 1:30 you eat typically, right? Even if you have to set timers on your phone to go off for your meals, make sure you stick to them. Okay. If you decide to do intermittent fasting, because I know I mentioned that before, stick to an eating window. All right. So for me, I typically eat now from 12 p.m. Eastern to around 8:30 p.m. Eastern at night. That's like my eating window. And during that window, I have consistent eating times. I typically eat between 12 and 1, then I'll have a snack between 3 and 4, and then I'll have dinner between 6 and 7, then I'll have a post-dinner snack between 7 and 9. Okay. As long as you're sticking to your calories and protein requirements, fasting can work great, but we still got to have consistency within that window. So you got to remember that this is a lifestyle with the overarching goal of making a calorie deficit if you're trying to lose weight, or maintenance if you're trying to maintain weight loss, as enjoyable, flexible, and free as humanly possible. Right? You achieve none of this by messing around with certain days where you're not eating anything, and then some days where you're eating in a 4-hour window, some days where you eat breakfast, some days where you don't. As you get more advanced and you have rock solid control over your eating systems, then you can experiment with longer fasts, right? Then you can experiment with calorie cycling if needed. Usually, I'll be honest, most of my clients don't need that stuff. They need simple, straightforward, consistent, day in and day out, doing simple but enjoyable things, okay? Here's another one. If you ever mess up on your diet, and this is something I used to do all the time, don't try to compensate, okay? What happens to a lot of people is they binge eat, okay? They binge a little bit, maybe not a full on-out binge, but then they think, well, I'll just compensate tomorrow and I'll be fine. I'll enjoy myself today. I'll go YOLO, right? And then tomorrow I'll just eat a lot less. And that's how our irrational brain starts to work against us. But your body doesn't care about that. If you've ever gone overboard one day, it will affect the rest of that week. And what's more is, if you try to make up for this the next day, you're going to start to get into this really unhealthy schedule. Okay. So now, even though you're even on paper, the amount of effort, stress, and pain that's required to get even has now started to eat up your willpower reserves tremendously. Okay. And one wrong move at any time during the rest of the week can really set you off on another binge. And then the cycle just continues on and on. So don't try to compensate. Just stick to your usual routine after a binge. The fastest way to get back on track is just eat the next meal that's in your schedule. The number two thing, so we've talked about kind of the roller coaster deal with scheduling and doing different things each day. The next one I see is calories are just way too low. So over the years, there's been a lot of infamous studies performed on groups of people. There was one called the Minnesota experiment, where people were on just like super low calories. And I'm sure you can guess what happened. They lost an incredible amount of weight, okay? But the real problem was setting a massive calorie deficit that started to show up in this experiment, was that they gained all the weight back, okay? And then some. So there's a real problem when we set calories way too low in today's world. We're surrounded by calories. We're surrounded by food on basically every corner of every street. If you go to the car wash now, there's snacks, right? Everywhere we go, there's food. There's temptation everywhere. So in that experiment, with the Minnesota experiment, they had a controlled environment. They didn't have food enticing people left and right. It was very, very systemized. But in the modern world, you cannot slash your calories by 30% and expect your fat loss to last. It just won't. So what do you do? Well, we got to set some numbers. Now, what I'm going to suggest is that you give it time as well. So when you set the right amount of calories and you have your protein dialed in, your calories dialed in at a sustainable number, let's give it time to actually work. Don't constantly be dropping calories, slashing calories just because you woke up and the scale's not down one day. All right. What I like to set a lot of people at, and you can write this one down, is take your goal body weight times 12. And that's a good starting point for total calories for the day. So goal body weight times 12. It's a really good starting point to hit your calories. Now, if you're really active, you can maybe bump that up to 13, right? If you're moving all day long, you have a really physical and physically demanding job. But if you're sedentary, right, if you're stuck at a desk all day, you don't move a lot, maybe take that number to 11. That's about as low as I would go. Okay. Very simple, very effective. What I can tell you too is a lot of guys ask me, like, what should my protein, carbs, and fats look like? Well, I put together a whole training. It's our macro mastery training. It's inside of our free community. If you comment the word team, I'll add you to that group and I'll teach you how to set macros. But what I can tell you is that the number one macro to get dialed in that's going to help you with appetite, and for me, it really changed the game with binge eating, was getting my protein to a manageable number. Not too high, not too low. For me, that number is about a gram of protein per pound of goal body weight every single day. All right. So eating more protein is going to increase your metabolism. It's going to help you retain muscle when you're losing fat. It's going to keep you fuller for longer. It's going to keep you satisfied on fewer calories, which is also really important when it comes to managing your appetite, managing your swings with appetite. What I would suggest is loading up your freezer with meats, okay? Stock up when you can on healthy meat sources like chicken, beef, steak, all that stuff, right? Keep it in your freezer and just unthaw it every week. Also, keep protein on hand, protein powder, ready to drink protein drinks, because the last thing we want to do is go into our weeks unprepared, right? So there's also a big difference in the type of fuel sources that we get, right? When we talk about fats and carbs, those things matter. But for me, it's really about getting quality versions of those things. So for example, there's a huge difference in getting fat from salmon, right, than it is like a cheeseburger with fries from a fast food place. Even if the fat content is roughly the same in some cases, you're getting a lot of crappy fat source from the fast food stuff versus the healthy source from salmon. So I noticed that my appetite was much more under control when I cooked my own food or got my food from a reliable source like a grocery store or a meal prep company. Okay. Same with carbohydrates. I get most of my carbs from things like potatoes. I make hash browns. I make diced potatoes, or rice. Okay. Versus like the sugary stuff from cookies and processed crap. Those things really increase my appetite versus make me feel satiated. All right. There's a lot of reasons for this, obviously, but sticking to whole foods versus processed foods 80% of the time, game changer when it came to starting to control my appetite. You don't have to track everything meticulously. I think that can also lead to binge eating, right? Where you just get so fixated on the numbers and being perfect with them that if you're not perfect, you're weighing your food out, you're taking things, food scale everywhere you go. That can cause a really unhealthy relationship with food. And I know that was the case for me too. Like I learned to track macros and that was freeing for a while, but then eventually it started to really bog me down and I would get so in my head. So nowadays I just worry about total calories, keeping a window kind of approach on that too, where I don't go above a number and I don't go below a number, and then hitting my protein. Get those two things right and life is good. Okay. Life is really good. So, and here's the honest truth, if you want to get ripped and lean, you're going to have to track at the beginning. All right. Calories and protein. We set you up with a meal rotation system, which by the way, you can learn about our program, our True Transformation System. It is a game changer for guys who want to reclaim their power, right? They want to reclaim how they feel about themselves, their confidence. Right now, they feel empty inside. They feel like they're invisible in their home. They feel like they're just a walking ATM machine. All they do is work all day, feel like crap, try to, dilute their pain with alcohol and food. They hate how they look in the mirror. We have a True Transformation System that includes a network of high performing people that will surround you with success. If you're interested in that, I put the link to check out our program below in the description. But like I said in the beginning, there's a little bit of cleanup that needs to take place. All right. But we don't need to set up this unhealthy relationship with food where we have to be perfect with every morsel that we eat. All right. So, here's another thought around binge eating. Avoid the temptation to push overly hard right now out of the gate, right? It's kind of like running a race. You burn yourself out in the beginning and you're sacrificing your future willpower when you do that. Okay. Always remember that the harder you push now, the more you're eating into those willpower reserves. And you could be punishing your future self. So keep the long-term as the focus. You don't want to starve yourself ever, because then you'll have a heck of a lot less willpower. Your metabolism is also potentially going to crash. Okay, it's going to come down. I don't want to say completely crash, but it will start to get used to lower calories, and it will slow down, and you'll lose muscle, which is never a good thing. So, um, let's talk about the third big piece to this whole not binge eating anymore. All right, we got to start dealing with emotional eating. All right, this is a big one. And I would argue that unless you're doing something crazy with your calories or meal timing, this is probably the most common thing. The way I look at it is this: there are three main types of emotional eating. There's boredom, social, and loneliness. Okay. The quick examples would be eating at your desk at work because you're bored. I've been there, done that, and it's not easy, of course. The next one would be taking, clients out for a meal, or your wife out to dinner, or your kids to a pizza place, or whatever. It involves fun, other people, and it involves like tasty, highly enjoyable food. The third one is not necessarily due to people being single or not having a relationship. It's more of a general relationship issue. Okay. This can occur even if you're married. It can also, of course, occur with people who are not married, but the relationship status doesn't really matter. It's the feeling of not being fulfilled, not being connected, not being happy with your life. All right. So let's get into some solutions. So for boredom eating, if you're one of those guys who can't say no to cookies when they're brought around the office, or when you actually do manage to get out of the office, you just can't wait to pig out because you're bored, then this is for you, right? You're eating out of boredom. So you probably need more exciting things to go after in your life. A big thing that worked well for me in the summer of 2014, when I was, deep into a cut, was having exciting physique goals. Okay. Reminding myself of them multiple times per day. Shirtless and shredded is what I wanted. So I'd have to remind myself of this. And this was enough for me back then to keep myself motivated. And it really helped me maintain my ability to consistently say no to the junk. Okay. My binge inducing foods. So make sure you have goals that it gets you pumped up every day, even if it's not fitness related stuff, something to get that drive, that energy going. Okay. And make sure you review them often. You have to also similarly remind yourself, what is the desire behind this? Why am I doing this? Okay. Your diet, getting shredded, getting lean is not always going to be easy, because nothing worthwhile, nothing worth achieving ever is easy. But finding your why is what will truly separate you from the version of yourself who binge eats out of boredom all the time, and someone who's so dialed in with their goals and dreams and hopes that food is no longer the source of entertainment. Okay. So here we go. What is your why, right? I wrote down some questions that you should ask yourself. Is it you want more confidence and personal power? Do you want better health, less chance of cancer, diabetes? Is your sex life not where you want it to be? Do you want to improve intimacy with your spouse? Do you want to be able to play with your kids? Do you want to be able to play with your grandkids? Do you want to be the person who's thriving even in his 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond? Whatever your why is, you need to remind yourself of it frequently, particularly during times that test your willpower. It's really crucial. Okay. You got to find your main driving force. People who consistently cave into, pizza because they're around pizza with their kids, or allow their boss to ruin their food choices because they go out to eat and they can't say no to the junk, or can't say no to donuts being around them in the office, or, it's almost typically a lack of desire around a very powerful why, but it's just not a strong enough why. If you have a strong enough why, your binge eating will come down. I'm not saying it's going to cure your binge eating, but it will help you tremendously. It helped me tremendously. All right. So you also got to have an exciting overall lifestyle. This was another one for me that helped me push through some of the dark times when I was really struggling with binge eating. I was starting to get really good at, developing a system to get over it. But what I'd always do is I'd plan events. I'd plan fun times with friends where I wanted to show up feeling my best. It's motivating. It stops you from ever being, or at least not always being bored. And you have something you're working towards, right? You got to have targets. You got to have checkpoints in this journey. For me now, it's like I plan, little day trips with my spouse. I plan a little getaways with my kids, or visiting old friends. If you got a lot of fun stuff going on in your life, you're less likely to just be bored, right? So boredom eating is less likely to happen. So let's talk about the social life aspect, right? Um, a huge one, especially for extroverted people who feel empowered around people. Social eating is a common struggle, right? Friday night going out to eat, Saturday night going out to eat, Sundays hanging out, having food. Alcohol is a big problem area too. It's difficult to lose weight significantly when you're drinking a lot. Seeing as we're talking about binge eating in this video, I don't think there's anything more conducive to binging than drinking alcohol with fun people, especially if you're in a calorie deficit and you've been eating really well and you feel like you can reward yourself, because it's not really the way it works. Okay. You're actually harming yourself in a lot of ways. It's a mindset of like, I've earned the right to drink my face off and eat my face off because I've been so good. I'm going to go out and socially do what everybody else is doing. At least this is how it was for me, right? I'm speaking from experience here and also working with a lot of clients over the years. It's important to learn to have fun without eating crappy food. So there's a couple solutions here. Number one is you can cook a big healthy meal with loads of protein before you go out on a Friday or Saturday and eat with your friends or your spouse and just keep it light when you're out. Also, you could just drink lots of water before you go out, and also look at the menu before you go out. Choose in advance. What are you going to eat? Commit to it ahead of time. All right. You don't need to get sucked into, all the stuff, or set up your nutrition plan like we do with our clients, which you can learn about our program that transforms guys from the inside out, right? We set guys up with a plan to be able to enjoy a couple meals a week guilt-free. All right. It's not cheat meals. It's just part of the plan. Thirdly, you can minimize alcohol when you're out. If you're, consuming a lot of alcohol, well, that's going to lead to typically in most cases, a lot of poor food choices. Now, if you don't think you can have the self-control to carry out the no alcohol thing when you go out, then we gotta recenter our priorities. Okay. There's what's called a happiness change curve. Okay. It's short-term pain, but long-term gain. You can't be YOLOing it, or, you only live once, 24/7, expect to lose weight with that, right? Do you want to have a couple hours of fun or a lifetime of satisfaction? Now, once again, I'm not telling you to say no to alcohol forever. I still enjoy wine in moderation. But there are certain times a year where I don't really drink much at all, because I just have bigger goals that drive me more, right? And I can still have fun without alcohol. But that leads me to the next thing, which in emotional eating is loneliness, right? Loneliness, like I said before, is not limited to people who aren't in a relationship. It could be anybody. It's just simply disconnect for whatever reason. It could be a disconnect because the person has been single for a while, or because he or she and their partner resent each other, or it could just be down to, once again, boredom in a relationship. So you feel lonely, right? So either way, it makes people eat more food. And I've seen people drown this loneliness with food and alcohol. Some of the people who drink the most on a night in are people in long-term relationships. Okay. The solution to loneliness binging is to spend more time with people that you enjoy spending time with. If you don't have those people in your life, you got to find that community. It's right. Why we have such a powerful community inside of our program, because I don't believe that just having a coach is the answer. I think coaching plus community brings a whole nother element to the success formula that a lot of people don't have. They got to have a support system. You can't just be you. You can't suffer in silence. And also on the flip side of that, if you're spending a lot of time with people who negatively impact how you feel and they're bringing you down, man, you got to separate yourself from that. You got to put some distance between yourself and negativity. It just doesn't work. All right. So next up with this whole never binging thing again is an addiction to sugar. Now I know this whole idea of like, oh, addicted to sugar. I think it's just really addicted to processed crap. The crunchy stuff, the tasty stuff, that quick dopamine hit. I see the addiction because it's more of an addiction to just that feeling it gives you versus, like being addicted to a drug or something. It's more, not to say food doesn't have drug-like, response. It definitely does. But eating that crap leads to you wanting more of that crap, right? I saw this all the time when I was struggling with binge eating. You know, as soon as you start eating the cookies, it's like one cookie doesn't do it, two cookies doesn't do it. Nowadays, when I have cookies, I know like even to this day, I'm not going to just be able to have one. So if I bring it in my house, I better be prepared and in a place where I can have a few, right? Another thing that really impacts the ability to control binging is lack of sleep. Okay. The worst way to start your day is to have a poor night's sleep the night before. Less than 6 to 7 hours of sleep is most likely going to have a negative effect on things like your mood, your recovery, your appetite, energy, strength, cravings, willpower. And you're going to start to find yourself craving more of the junk throughout the day. And your willpower reserves, once again, will be a lot lower than usual. All this can set you up for a binge session. Okay. So how do you prevent this from happening? It all starts with adequate preparation. Make sure you're not drinking too much caffeine later in the day. Okay. Only in the morning or midday if possible. Make sure you're eating at least some form of healthy protein at night before you go to bed. All right. So that you're waking up a little more satiated than you would if you had like, you know, a bunch of sugar before bed, which I don't suggest you do, by the way. The other thing you can do is take some magnesium at bedtime. Wear blue light blockers from 6 p.m. to bedtime and beyond to help you just get into that sleep state, that sleepy state a little faster. All right. So let's talk about an action plan for binge eating. I covered a lot today. I wrote down a lot of notes. So I hope this was helpful. By the way, if you want access to more trainings like this, exclusive free trainings, I have a bunch. I put together a whole book of trainings on advanced fat loss and how to really, truly, permanently transform how you look, feel, and perform. Just comment the word team below this video, and I'll send you a link to join our exclusive network. It's free. The reason why it's free is we hope that we give you enough value to where you will take the next step and join our community when it's the right time. All right. So, action plan. Set a timetable and stick to it. So you got to stick to the same eating times if you want to avoid binging, right? I recommend if you're not going to eat breakfast, stick to 12 to 8 p.m. at night. All right. It's a really good window that will keep you consistent. Also keep your meal times during that window as consistent as you can. Make sure your calories are on point. Don't go too low in total calories to start. There are times where aggressive fat loss makes sense, but I would say it's a really good habit to err on the side of moderation until you can prove that you can stick to that. When you can stick to that, then you can play around with more advanced, calorie levels. All right. Set fitness goals and review them often. Okay. If your mind stays focused on the process and a big and desirable outcome, you're going to be less tempted along the way to divert, right? To go off the path and start to destroy your potential of hitting your targets. All right. Find your why. Why are you doing this? Why is it important for you to be healthy? Review that often. Okay. For social events, either plan ahead, all right, or make specific changes to the overall plan to set yourself up for success. Avoid binge drinking because that typically leads to binge eating and especially leads to hangovers, which of course then lead to poor food choices the next day. All right. Spend more time with people who make you feel good. Spend less time with people who bring you down from a mental standpoint. Manage your sugar intake and manage your sleep. All these things combined have led to me avoiding major binge eating sessions for years now. For the better part of the last 12 years, I've been able to really take full control of my binge eating. And now I stay at, under 12 to 13% body fat year round, where before I struggled to crack 20% body fat, right? And that was because my binge eating patterns that just prevented me from doing that. So I've been a coach in the online space now for 15 years. I've been a personal trainer for over 20 years, worked with over 7,500 people just like you who want to take back control over their life, right? And they want to use fitness as the missing tool to improve all areas of life. And I think binge eating is something we should talk about more because I know it plagues a lot of people and it can really be frustrating. So some people call it stress eating. Some people call it emotional eating. Some people call it cravings. But oftentimes what it really is just a relationship with food that needs to be fixed. So hope this video helped and shed some light. I tried to cover a lot. I wrote down a lot of notes. So let me know in the comments if this one was beneficial, and look forward to chatting with you on the next one. Life moves fast. Make it count. Talk to you soon. Peace.